Hi, I'm Kat and you already know the story. I have for you a true crime case. I'll also be doing my makeup at the same time and a word in Romanian. So the word for today is Polonia. 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 Well done guys, you just said Poland. Today's video has been suggested by Samantha, who is one of my YouTube subscribers. So thank you Samantha for your suggestion. Andrzej Kunowski, nicknamed the Beast of Mława, was a Polish murderer, serial rapist and suspected serial killer. Andrzej was a prolific sex offender in his native country in Poland before moving to England in 1996. He remains the prime suspect in the disappearances of 3 girls between 1992 and 2000, for which he was never charged. Andrzej was born on 29th of March 1956 in Warsaw, Poland. He was born as Andrzej Klembert. He was the only child of parents of really questionable character. They would steal anything that they could get their hands on, and as a result Andrzej had a troubled childhood. When he was 2 years old, he was sent off to an orphanage because his mother, father and maternal grandmother were in prison. His grandfather was locked up in a state psychiatric hospital for unspecified sexual offenses. When Elżbieta Klembert, his mother, was released from prison, she actually took Andrzej back, divorced her husband and then married a cement mason named Stefan Kunowski. Andrzej's stepfather was actually a respected builder who worked on construction sites, and his mother then became a homemaker. When Andrzej was still young, the family moved to Mława, a town 80 miles north of Warsaw, after his stepfather was offered an apartment in the city center by the PB Roll Company, who wanted to give him a job. The town was known for producing shoes, milk and meat, but it also had a dark history. During World War II, around 7,000 Jews from Mława were exterminated. The survivors in 1946 found that Mława's Polish people excavated graves in the Jewish cemetery and removed gold teeth, jewelry and other valuables from the corpses, which were then left to rot in piles. The hatred of Jews was so intense there that a memorial to Holocaust victims in Mława was destroyed again and again after the war. Andrzej's parents were seen as decent, likable people in the town. Now, growing up in Mława in the 1960s, Andrzej was seen as a mama's boy. And when other children teased him, he reacted so viciously that it seemed out of proportion to the insult. He was a small child, but he was very strong. During fights, he would throttle his mates with a bear claw grip until they screamed. He also developed a habit of eyeing pretty girls with a frightening glint in his eyes, as though he was in a trance. Elżbieta, his mother, expressed concern that her son seemed unable to remember these episodes of fighting or the inappropriate staring. As a teenager, Andrzej also began to steal. He stole money from his parents' savings book and then ran away from home. At the age of 13, he was sent to a facility for delinquent juveniles where his various problems were allowed to worsen. Andrzej began attacking girls and women soon after he was released from juvenile detention. From the beginning, he seemed to be the most frightening type of sexual predator. His attacks didn't stem from a random impulse, but rather they were compulsive, coming in clusters. Most of his victims were in their teens and their early 20s. The oldest victim was 41 years old, although most of his more mature targets seemed younger than their actual age. He assaulted at least 3 11-year-old girls. His MO was to stalk a pretty teenage girl after school. If she was a child without after-school supervision, he would break in and attack her. In other cases, victims were dragged off into bushes or remote fields. His attacks were based on pure strength. Andrzej dressed himself elegantly with shirts carefully tucked in and shoes shined to a high gloss. His nickname was actually the Little Doctor, but he wasn't a clever criminal, although he didn't really need to be one. He was on a spree for 30 years. His first reported rape came in June 1973 when he attacked a neighbor girl in Mława. He dragged her into the bushes and forced himself on her. The victim actually knew him, and so she identified him as her attacker. Andrzej was first arrested for rape in 1973 when he was 17 years old, and this was in Poland. Two other teenagers stepped forward to accuse him in similar attacks, but he was prosecuted for just the one case and he was sent to prison for 3 years. The court believed that because of his age he won't be relapsing, so that's why he was given this light sentence. But the court was so wrong. On July 16, 1977, 1 month after he was paroled, he struck again, attacking a 24-year-old woman who looked younger than her age. He choked her until she lost consciousness. Luckily, someone witnessed the attack and they jumped in to help, otherwise Andrzej probably would have killed her. He spent less than 9 months in jail after this attack, then went on a violent spree, traveling back and forth between Mława and Warsaw in search for more victims. At one point, Andrzej was working as an ambulance driver, and while driving his ambulance, he would often see women picking strawberries by the road, so he would stop the car, run into the field, and drag the victims into bushes nearby, where he would rape them. Allegedly, one time, he lured one victim by asking her for directions from inside his car. He pretended not to hear what the victim was saying, and so he asked her to lean into the car. When she did so, he closed the window on her neck and trapped her, raping her while she was trapped. I don't know why this reminds me of Ted Bundy actually, how he would lure victims to his car by pretending that he needed help with his bags, having a broken arm. Now, going back to our case, Andrzej didn't stop. On 12 of April 1978, he tried to rape a 22-year-old woman who actually fought him off. Later, in the same day, he raped a 27-year-old woman. On June 23rd, he robbed and raped a 22-year-old woman, dragging her into bushes. 8 days later, he raped a 16-year-old girl, followed by the rape of a 12-year-old on July 21st. Andrzej's urges seemed to get more violent after those attacks. Most of his rapes after July 1978 involved choking. He often left his victims unconscious, but luckily none of them died. Experts recognize choking and strangulation as a singular form of criminal pathology. It's considered the most intimate variety of assault or murder, more personal and hands-on than the use of a gun or a knife, giving the assailant an exceptional sense of domination and control. On August the 4th, Andrzej Kunowski choked and raped a 19-year-old. Then, 1 week later, he did the same against a 22-year-old, then a 20-year-old on September the 6th, a 17-year-old just 2 days later, and another 17-year-old on September 20th. In October 1978, he raped, robbed, and choked at least 4 women in 1 week, aged 17, 20, 28, and 30. He attacked 4 more women and girls in November, aged 19, 21, 15, and 11. The 11-year-old was his youngest victim at that point. He raped and choked a 16-year-old on December 14th, then another 11-year-old 3 days before Christmas. On January 25, 1979, he stole a car that he used for a rampage of sexual violence the next day. On January 26, he robbed and tried to strangle a 41-year-old woman. He robbed and groped a 36-year-old woman, then raped, robbed, and choked a 20-year-old woman. Finally, Polish police caught up with him and sent him back to jail. But his sexual assaults continued even in jail. On February 24th, he forced a male cellmate to perform oral sex. Then he raped another cellmate on March the 1st. It seemed astonishing that the police authorities didn't suspect him or arrest him for all of those attacks I previously mentioned, especially because he was already a twice convicted rapist. You would think that, he would be on their radar, but it didn't get any better, because somehow Andrzej escaped from Polish prison on 25th of April 1979, and only 6 weeks later he raped a 13-year-old girl that he followed home from school. He was arrested the next day and returned to prison, but guess what? He escaped yet again that August, and he went on to commit even more attacks before he was arrested yet again. Finally, he faced justice for his long list of crimes, which included 17 sexual assaults and 8 attempted rapes. He went to trial in 1980 in Sichon. The prosecutor, Waldemar Smarzewski, asked for a long sentence, recognizing that Andrzej would never change. He told the Daily Mail, quote, "There were about 70 charges made up of rapes, attempted rapes, larceny with children, endangering a child's life, and attempted murder. This was a very important and dangerous case because of the number of victims and what he did to them. I wanted to put him away for longer because he was very dangerous. I was sure that if he left prison, he would go back to rape and maybe even kill." End of quote. Andrzej Kunowski was sentenced to a total of 30 years, but then the revolution happened. When the communist regime fell in Poland in 1989, the opening of prison doors became popular. And guess what? Andrzej Kunowski was one of those who benefited. He was freed for good behavior in 1991 after serving less than 6 years for attacking 23 women and girls and 2 men. After he was released, Andrzej married and became a father to a daughter. He found work as a cosmetics salesman, and it seemed that he was changing. But as always, his compulsion got the best of him. On 12th of August 1992, he raped another 11-year-old girl in Mława. He then moved to Warsaw, where he raped 2 more teenagers. He was arrested in 1993, but he escaped prison yet again, and he was on the run for 2 years. In March 1995, he was a suspect in the 1992 disappearance of 14-year-old Agnieszka Żybica, who disappeared while walking home from school in Mława. She had finished her lessons at one of the primary schools in the town when she went missing after being followed. Born on 8th of March 1978, she was last seen on March 19, 1992. There was a search organized with police and local residents, but sadly Agnieszka was never found. As part of the investigation, Andrzej was questioned, but he wasn't charged in the case. Another person questioned was Leszek Pekalski, known as the Vampire of Bitów, a Polish murderer and suspected serial killer, and I will actually cover his case in another video. Now this guy, he wasn't charged either. 2 months later, in 1995, Andrzej was arrested again in Warsaw in connection with 2 attacks that happened on consecutive days, both against teenage girls who, just like Agnieszka, were followed home from school. He was charged with raping the 2 girls. As he awaited trial, he began filing medical complaints about persistent pain in his left hip. X-rays showed no problem, but doctors finally agreed to his insistence to be scheduled for hip replacement surgery. Whilst in custody for 2 years, he also complained of an obstructed artery, which was confirmed during a medical examination. As a result, the courts issued that he temporarily be released for treatment. In June 1996, Polish authorities announced that Andrzej would be freed to await hip operation. But it turned out that his hip wasn't so bad to stop him from running from justice. He sold his apartment in Mława and used the money to buy a fake Polish passport and flee. He then boarded a bus in Warsaw and he went through border security checks across Northern Europe, through Germany and Belgium and into Calais, France, where he boarded a ferry which crossed Dover into England. On October 15, 1996, he arrived by bus at London's Victoria Coach Station on Buckingham Palace Road. When Polish authorities realized that Andrzej left Poland, they issued an international warrant for his arrest through Interpol. His photo and fingerprints were made available via Interpol's crime database to the 125 member countries. The United Kingdom was among them. But Andrzej was not fingerprinted when he arrived in the United Kingdom, so British authorities had no way of knowing that a notorious sex offender had arrived there, so Andrzej had a clean slate. Using his fake passport, he got a job as a dry cleaner in Acton, London. Just a few months after he arrived to the UK, he began stalking girls in the area, but each time he was unsuccessful in raping them. On 22nd of May 1997, he found a new victim. 12-year-old Macedonian immigrant Katarina Koneva, who lived with her parents in Hammersmith, London. After following Katarina to her home, he broke in and blocked the door with a chair to stop anyone from going in. He choked the girl with a cord, but he was actually interrupted by Katarina's father Traice, who saw him through a crack in the door. Andrzej jumped out of the window and ran. Traice was trying to chase him down, but Andrzej threatened to stab him with a knife. He then carjacked a woman nearby and fled the scene. Traice tried to save his daughter. He cut the cord wrapped around her neck, but police and paramedics were unable to save her life. The Koneva family actually moved from the Balkans to Britain 2 years before Katarina's death. Traice came first to the UK around 4 years previously. His wife, daughter and 6-year-old son joined him 2 years later. They moved to West London in search of sanctuary from ethnic violence in their native Macedonia. Their new life in Hammersmith had flourished for 2 years. Katarina's father, Traice, was a mature student learning English at the local college, and Katarina was a bright, quiet girl. She spoke good English and she attended Holland Park School. On May 22nd, 1997, Traice got delayed getting home because of an exam at college, while Katarina's mother, Zaclina, was out with a friend. It was the first time that Katarina was left home alone, but her parents believed that she was old enough to be okay. Traice rushed home on his bike, knowing that she was home alone for the first time, but he expected everything to be just fine. He knew though that something was wrong when he got home to the flat and he tried to open the front door, but he couldn't do it. Katarina wasn't answering either. At first, he was thinking that perhaps Katarina was changing her clothing, so, he waited for a few seconds. But the door was barricaded with a chair. Looking through the keyhole, he saw Katarina's bag on the floor. He then looked under the door, and that's when he saw a pair of men's black shoes. Seeing that he can't get into the house, he was kicking at the front door with all of his strength, having the awful feeling that something was wrong. He was desperate, so Traice ran downstairs, around the house, and in the neighbor's garden, he came face to face with the killer. Climbing out of the window, he noticed a small drop of blood on the killer's face on the left side. He asked him what he was doing in his house, but the killer just looked at him and ran away. So Traice ran after him, calling for help. He chased him for a few blocks, but the man managed to get away screaming for help whilst Traice had a hold on him. Two workmen saw this and they ordered Traice to back off. The attacker ran off and jumped in front of a Fiat Uno. The driver of the car, Christina Kearney, said that the attacker kept screaming, help me, call the police," but he then suddenly threatened her with a knife, got her out of the car and sped off. He then abandoned the car nearby and escaped on foot. Meanwhile, because of his limited English, Traice didn't explain the situation to the workman, but instead he ran straight back home, stopping to ring a police alarm. What Traice didn't know, however, was that when he instinctively decided to chase Andrzej, trying to catch him, Katarina, his daughter, was dying in a room in the family flat. After getting back home, Traice broke through a chair that was barricading the door and he found Katarina unconscious on the floor. She had been choked with a piece of cord cut from a Virgin Atlantic flight bag that Katarina used for her books. The garrote was so tight that Traice couldn't release it with his hands. He got a knife from the kitchen and cut the cord from his daughter's throat. The bright, quiet 12-year-old girl was raped and strangled during a 3-hour period. A man who lived downstairs from the Koneva family said that he heard Traice shouting, "Please come and help me, someone." So they went to help him and they saw Katarina on the floor. They didn't know if she was still alive, but they believed that she was because, according to them, she was still breathing. The ambulance arrived and they tried to resuscitate her, but the police said later that she died. Katarina's mother, Zaclina Konev, visits her daughter's grave almost every day. At home, a shrine commemorates Katarina's life, who was murdered by a pedophile who should never have been freed. Zaclina and Traice are now divorced. In 2004, Zaclina was living in a new flat in Hammersmith with her son Christian, who was then 12 years old. Zaclina has bought Katarina Christmas and birthday presents every year since her daughter was murdered. She said that she talks to Katarina every day, saying goodnight every night. Katarina was a pupil in the first year at Holland Park School in Kensington, West London, where head teacher Mary Marsh wrote to all parents saying that Katarina was an exceptional student and a great loss. In a cruel twist, however, Katarina's father, Trece, became the initial suspect in her murder. Police didn't believe his story about chasing off an attacker and he was detained while detectives investigated. Zaclina Konev, his wife, arrived at the police station to find him behind bars and she jumped to conclusions, asking him what he did to Katarina. Traice later said that he was banging his head from wall to wall in his cell. He just couldn't believe what was happening. But he was quickly cleared on evidence, which included the eyewitnesses' accounts, a security camera videotape that showed him chasing the suspect, and fingerprints found on the window the attacker climbed through. Police found another clue that would prove crucial: a single hair on Katarina's sweater. The investigation revealed that the same man who killed Katarina had earlier stalked 3 other teenagers in Hammersmith. Each girl had long dark hair just like Katarina. Detectives theorized that the attacker followed the girl home, made sure that she was alone, then knocked on the door. Katarina opened the door, probably thinking it was her father. It seemed, quite simple, with both forensic and eyewitness evidence. But the investigation actually, surprise, surprise, went nowhere. The killer just disappeared. But actually, he was hiding in plain sight. He had been in and out of police custody within a month of the murder. But unfortunately for Katarina's loved ones, the competence of London's Metropolitan Police really lacked in this case. The killer was used to law enforcement incompetence. He benefited from bungling bureaucrats from one end of Europe to the other. The killer was a native of Poland whose career as a rapist would span 30 years. The attack on Katarina 219 days after Andrzej Kunowski arrived in England didn't go as planned. Firstly, he was interrupted by her father, then he had to abort the assault before reaching the sexual gratification he got from throttling children. The close contact with witnesses including Trace, the two workmen, and Christina Kearney, the owner of the hijacked car, placed him at risk of being identified. He lived in Acton, just a few miles from the scene of the crime in Hammersmith. He assumed, well, you would assume that these clues might soon lead Scotland Yard's finest to the door of his flat. So he decided to get out of town. The day after the murder, Andrzej gave up his room in Acton and fled to the countryside, taking a job at the strawberry farm in Ledbury, west of London. But stealing cost him the job after just 1 month. He was accused of stealing cash from the office at Seddington Farms. Glyn Lewis, the farm manager, said that he was quite strange and he was a loner. They had hundreds of different workers on the farm, but he stuck out in Glyn's mind. Andrzej got arrested for theft, but Britain dropped that charge and focused on deportation when they learned that he was in the country illegally. After first claiming Portuguese citizenship, Andrzej admitted that he was from Poland. Andrzej had applied for asylum under an economic hardship, but while his application was being considered, he was allowed to walk free again. His petition was denied in the fall of 1997, but by then he disappeared in London. He wasn't even fingerprinted after his arrest, not to mention the DNA swabbing. Shortly after Katarina's murder, Scotland Yard announced a £20,000 reward for any information that may lead to the capture of Katarina Koneva's killer. After examining the crime scene, they found hairs and fingerprints belonging to the attacker, but they were unable to connect them to the killer. Detectives working on the case in West London seem to have plenty of leads, but it still proved to be the most frustrating of cases. At least 7 eyewitnesses saw the attacker running away, and a security video showed Katarina's father desperately trying to catch the killer. But despite an extensive inquiry and 3 appeals for information on BBC's Crime Watch program, the trail went cold. In 1998, British immigration authorities actually received a letter from Andrzej Kunowski saying that he returned to Poland. The letter had a Poland postmark, but it was probably sent by his mother. Immigration officials continued to list him as missing, but there was no attempt in finding him. He probably never even left London. Only if they would have tried finding him, they would find that he owned a Renault car that he kept registered and insured. Even his mother traveled from Poland to visit him in his Acton apartment at least 3 times in the late 1990s. In 2001, he even had a heart bypass at Hammersmith Hospital, located just a block from the apartment where he strangled Katarina Koneva. In July 2002, Andrzej Kunowski was arrested for collecting welfare benefits under the name Jose Marco da Diaz, but again, he was released before anyone made a connection to the Katarina Koneva murder or his history as a sexual predator in Poland. The breakthrough only came in 2003 after an illegal Polish immigrant was found guilty at the Old Bailey of raping a foreign student and sentenced to 9 years. The court heard how Andrzej Kunowski, who was then 45 years old and a tailor living in Acton, approached the 21-year-old Korean student outside the tube station as she was waiting for a friend, and he offered to find her a bed seat. On 22nd of September 2002, Andrzej was wandering around in the London Underground station at Ealing Broadway. There, he spotted a young woman who recently arrived from Korea, who looked younger than her 21 years. Andrzej moved close enough to see that she was looking at ads of rooms for rent, so he struck up a conversation with her. He said that he can help her find a cheap room at his boarding house in Acton, and she agreed to go with him there. Once inside his room, he attacked her. He tied her up and subjected her to a brutal 3-hour rape. The young woman said that he choked her until she almost passed out. She managed to convince him to let her go by promising to call him the next day to schedule another visit. But instead, she went to the police and Andrzej was quickly located, arrested and charged with rape. At trial in May 2003 at London's Old Bailey, Andrzej claimed that the sex was actually consensual as a thank you because he helped the young woman find a place to stay. The judge, however, dismissed his alibi as absurd and he was convicted and sentenced to 9 years. But even then, the British had no reason to believe that he was a serial rapist and murderer. Only after his conviction did the extent of his crimes and the government mess-up that allowed him to attack again and again became clear. While in prison, his DNA was uploaded in a police database to check if he could be linked to any unsolved crimes. After he was sent to prison, his identity and DNA profile were shared with other countries via the Interpol database. Through that data, Polish authorities realized that he was the serial rapist who fled while on medical furlough. Scotland Yard compared his DNA sample from Andrzej Kunowski with DNA from swab evidence taken after the 1995 rape of one of the teen girls in Warsaw, Poland, and it matched. The match prompted British police to begin looking at unsolved attacks on teenage girls there. Within days, both DNA and fingerprint evidence linked Andrzej Kunowski to the murder of Katarina Koneva. He was charged in that case on 29th of July 2003. Andrzej Kunowski claimed, however, that it was a case of mistaken identity. But the physical evidence was coupled with eyewitness testimony from Trace Koneva, the victim of car theft, and others. His DNA was identical to a hair discovered in a packaging containing a cardigan which belonged to Katarina Koneva. He also left his fingerprints on the window and window ledge as he escaped from the family flat where Katarina lived. Forensic analysis showed that the prints were fresh and were made within the previous 72 hours. Following the discovery, the case caused a media frenzy demanding further investigation into his past. The English authorities began interviewing Andrzej, who confessed to them that he was on the run from Polish police on charges of rape, and after cross-checking his claims, his extensive record of rapes dating back to the 1970s was revealed to the public. The final piece of the jigsaw came from Polish police. They had charged Andrzej with the rape of a 10-year-old girl in Warsaw, Poland in 1995. In this attack, Andrzej started to choke the girl and left her tied up before he was caught escaping from her flat. DNA evidence from a sofa bed in the flat was analyzed by Scotland Yard and proved to be a perfect match to Andrzej. But Andrzej never stood trial for the rape of the girl because he was released on bail for the health reasons, and he then fled to England, where he carried on attacking girls. It also came to light that Andrzej had attacked another 27 women and children in Poland, mostly in the northeastern town of Mława, where he was a driver for a construction company. He committed his first rape at 17 years old and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He then came to England in 1996, where he disappeared after he was refused asylum. He was ordered to be deported, but he failed to turn up for deportation. Police from the UK Serious Crime Directorate were also investigating offences across Europe where women have gone missing to see if they may be linked to Andrzej Kunowski. In March 2004, Andrzej Kunowski was brought to trial at the Old Bailey for the murder of Katarina Koneva, where he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to a whole life order without any chance of ever being paroled. Following his conviction, he was labeled by several members of the prosecution and police force as one of the most dangerous and prolific sex offenders they have ever come across. After the verdict, police said that they would question Andrzej about the unsolved disappearances of other girls and the murder of 13-year-old Millie Dowler. Millie vanished 6 months earlier on March 21st, 2002, while walking home from Walton-on-Thames railway station in Surrey after school. Her body was found 7 months later in woodland near Fleet, Hampshire. A jury of 8 men and 4 women took less than 3 hours to render a guilty verdict, even though jurors were denied access to information about Andrzej's long history of attacks. The British press as well learned only at the end of the trial the extent of his history of rape and the government mistakes. As Detective Chief Inspector David Little said, quote, "He is probably the most dangerous sex offender I have ever come across and certainly the most prolific," end of quote. The press gave the little doctor a new nickname, the Beast of Poland. Judge Peter Beaumont handed out the maximum sentence of life in prison. Quote, "I would be failing in my duty in the light of the evidence about your behavior both in Poland and this country if I did not ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. You took the life of a child who was just beginning to enjoy what this country had to offer her and her family as refugees from hardship abroad. It was a life of great promise. You ended it in circumstances of great violence and terror," end of quote. In an angry statement after the verdict, Katarina's mother Zaklina said that she didn't feel happy. She was relieved that Andrzej was no longer free, but she didn't feel like justice was done. She said, quote, "All life imprisonment means is that other children will be safe and no other parent will have to go through what we have because of him," end of quote. But she feels angry that Andrzej fled to Britain from Poland, where he was under arrest for rape, when the Polish judge gave him 3 months bail to get the hip operation. He wasn't supervised, and instead of having the operation, he came to Britain as a tourist and then became an illegal immigrant. Zaklina became aware that he had serious criminal convictions and impending prosecutions in Poland, and she felt like something needs to be done to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. She also felt that the police would never catch Katarina's killer. 2 months after Katarina was murdered, Princess Diana died in Paris, and the public interest turned away from Katarina's murder to Princess Diana's death. 2 years later, the senior officer in Katarina's case, Detective Superintendent Hamish Campbell, was switched to the Jill Dando murder inquiry. That's when Zaklina felt that the investigation into her daughter's death was over. In 2000, 4 years after Katarina's murder, her parents divorced. Trace said that they couldn't overcome the barrier created when his wife, seeing him in jail, accused him of murdering their daughter. He said that he lost his little girl, but his wife was attacking him, and his 6-year-old son was looking at him with hate in his eyes. Things were never the same. He would argue all the time with his wife. Anything which reminded them of the pain of losing Katarina would set them off. He even told his wife he hates her, so they couldn't take it anymore and they decided to split up. Trace, a website designer by then, said that he tried to kill himself, but he decided not to for the sake of his son. Even though no crimes committed between June 1997 and Andrzej's final arrest in 2002 have been definitively linked to him, he has been suggested as the prime suspect in the disappearances of 2 women, both of whom disappeared in Ealing. The first was 19-year-old University of West London student Elizabeth Chow from Vietnam, who disappeared on 16th of April 1999. She went missing after she left home to go to Thames Valley University in Ealing. She was last seen by a friend at Ealing Broadway and later spotted on a CCTV camera at the local police station. The second victim was 27-year-old Lola Senkoya. She was a temp with Entertainment UK in Perivale, West London, and on 3rd of January 2000 she tried getting into her house, but she couldn't because her sister, who had the only key, was out. She then took the E2 bus and got off at Ealing Broadway Underground Station. Police feared that she may have arranged to meet someone and she came to harm. Police have dredged the rivers and canals, but they found nothing belonging to either Elizabeth or Lola. The British Home Office admitted it was a matter of concern that Andrzej Kunowski wasn't found as a wanted man years before. Asylum seekers are now fingerprinted and scrutinized through Interpol, although British law still doesn't mandate DNA testing of illegal immigrants. The Polish government said that it would like to prosecute Andrzej Kunowski should he ever be freed in Britain. Polish prosecutor Waldemar Smarzewski said that he knew Andrzej would strike again. He also said, quote, "He should remain behind bars for the rest of his life. I am sorry this psychopath ever came to Britain," end of quote. His mother, Elżbieta Kunowski, defended her son in an interview with the Daily Mail by saying that he was ill, not evil, and he needed proper medical and psychological care. She said that he is still her son and she loves him. They spoke often by phone, and according to her, Andrzej always praised the British system's good food and good medical care. Andrzej Kunowski died in Agen prison, Frankland, on 23rd of September 2009 from heart failure, according to the police. Shortly after his death, an appeal was made to the public in an effort to possibly connect him to any further rapes or murders committed in England, but as of 2021, no new developments have come forward. After his death, police have launched a new probe into the disappearance of the two missing girls, Elizabeth Chow and Lola Senkoya. Officers were appealing for his former cellmates or anyone who knew him to come forward with information. Elizabeth's mother, Fang, said that she believes her daughter may still be alive and appealed for people with information to contact police. Despite public appeals and renewed calls for information, her family have suffered 23 years without ever discovering what happened to the teenager. Elizabeth was last seen walking back from Thames Valley University after she handed in an assignment. The final sighting on CCTV shows her walking past Ealing Police Station at 6 p.m., around a mile from her home. Her family had been expecting her to return that evening, and her brother told the Evening Standard that they were immediately worried about her safety. Her parents never changed their phone numbers in the hope that she would one day return. Despite the police launching an investigation, the case suffered due to lack of witnesses, and Elizabeth's family have never been able to find out what happened to their daughter. Only 9 months later, another young woman vanished from the same road, sparking police concerns that the disappearances were connected. Computer graduate Lola Senkoya, then 27 years old, had spent the day working, like I mentioned, as a temp at the company Entertainment UK in Perivale. It's believed that she then boarded an E2 bus to Haven Green, where she embarked outside the Burger King, close to Ealing Broadway tube station. She was never seen again. Her bank accounts have not been touched since that day in January 2000, and her family and friends have never established what happened to her. Detectives initially questioned Andrzej Kunowski, but despite police suspicions, he was never charged due to lack of evidence pinpointing him to Elizabeth and Lola's disappearances. In 2012, a fresh appeal for information was launched, with Scotland Yard offering a £15,000 reward for anyone who might have information on the two women. Detective Chief Inspector Lee Presland of the Met's Homicide and Serious Crime Command said at the time, quote, "We are hoping that some information on either of the girls comes forward. We desperately want to provide some closure to the families. Maybe these years later someone will provide information that they didn't at the time. Maybe their allegiances have changed and they feel they can do so now. End of quote. Whilst officers have not ruled out that Elizabeth was alive, her family have been told to fear the worst. She remains listed on the website Missing People, which includes an age-progressed image to show how she might look now. I'm not sure what happened with Lola's case, but she is not on the Missing People website and I couldn't find any details that her case is still open. Police are also keen to speak to anyone with details about other crimes Andrzej Kunowski may have committed. So anyone with any information regarding Andrzej Kunowski should call police on 020 8358 0300 or Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. I mean, wow, this was just unbelievable and a complete failure all around by the Polish system and by the British system. Thank you guys so much for staying with me in today's video. Please do let me know what do you think, and I'm looking forward to reading all your comments. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!